My name is Miles, and this happened about 8 years ago when I was 24 and doing something I had no business doing alone at night on a back road in rural Ohio. I want to give some context because the decision I made that night was genuinely stupid, and I own that. I had been doing regional theater for about 3 years, not a career, more of an obsession I was feeding on weekends and evenings while I worked a day job I hated. I had gotten a call back for a production being staged at a small theater about 4 hours from where I lived in Columbus. The callback was on a Thursday evening, which meant driving out after work, doing the audition, and driving back the same night. My car was not in great shape. I had no GPS on my phone. This was before GPS was standard, and I was working off a printed set of directions that I had not double-checked before leaving. I missed a turn about 2 hours in and didn't realize it immediately. The roads out there are long and straight and look identical to each other at night, and by the time I understood I was lost, I had been on the wrong road for close to 40 minutes. I pulled over in front of a gas station in what I can only describe as a cluster of buildings that technically qualified as a town, a gas station, 2 or 3 dark storefronts, a few houses set back from the road. Half a dozen people outside the gas station who went quiet when I pulled in. I asked for directions. The exchange was short and uncomfortable. They told me what I needed to know, but the entire time there was something in the quality of the attention they were paying me that I couldn't categorize, not hostile exactly, just focused in a way that felt off. 4 of them standing completely still watching me as I pumped gas. Dead-eyed, which is the only word I have for it. I finished up and got back on the road as fast as I could. About an hour later, in the full dark with nothing but tree line on both sides of the road, I heard the sound. It started as a vibration I felt before I heard a low rumble through the wheel, and then the car pulled hard left and I knew immediately. Flat tire. I pulled over and got out and stood in the cold looking at the front left wheel fully deflated against the asphalt. When I crouched down to look at the damage, I saw it wasn't just flat. The tire had been punctured multiple times. I could see the nails, not 1, not 2, several of them driven through the rubber at angles that didn't happen from running over something on the road. Someone had put them there. I stood up and looked down the road in both directions. Nothing. Darkness in both directions and the sound of the trees. My phone had 1 bar of service, and I tried calling a tow company but couldn't communicate my location because I genuinely didn't know what road I was on. I called a friend back in Columbus and described everything I could remember about the drive. He said he'd try to figure out where I was and call me back. I sat in the car with the engine running and the heat on, and I waited. About 10 minutes later I saw headlights appear from the direction I'd come from. Far back, maybe a quarter mile. They stopped. Just sat there, stationary, bright enough to see but too far to identify. I watched them for a few minutes. They didn't move. I told myself it was someone who'd pulled over for the same reason I had, or someone checking a phone, or any of the normal explanations for a car stopped on a rural road at night. The headlights didn't move. Then a second pair of lights appeared ahead of me. Moving fast, coming in my direction. The vehicle slowed as it got close and pulled past me and stopped maybe 30 feet ahead. I could see it was a pickup truck, white, older, beat up along the rear panel. The truck that had been behind me started moving again. Coming closer. Slowly. I was sitting between 2 vehicles on a road where I had no service and no idea where I was, and the only people I had spoken to in the last hour were the ones who had stared at me with dead eyes at a gas station in a town that barely existed. The truck ahead of me, doors opened. I didn't wait to see who got out. I grabbed my backpack and my phone and I pushed out the driver's door as hard as I could and ran for the tree line. I could hear shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I ran maybe 30 feet into the trees and dove to the ground behind a fallen log and lay completely flat. I could hear footsteps on the road, voices, the sound of my car doors still open with the chime going. From the ground I could see flashlight beams sweeping the tree line. I stayed down for what felt like an hour but was probably closer to 10 minutes. The flashlight beams retreated. I heard doors closing, engines starting. The lights moved away, the truck behind me first, then the one ahead. When I was certain they were gone, I got up and started walking down the road in the opposite direction from the town. 40 minutes later, I flagged down a woman in a station wagon who, remarkably, stopped. She called the police and let me sit in her car until they arrived. The officers took my statement and I received 2 citations for the condition of my car, which I think is funny in retrospect but did not think was funny at the time. The dents on my car door where someone had tried to pull it open were noted in the report but not investigated further. There were no nails recovered from the scene because I hadn't thought to take them with me. I never found out who those people were or what they wanted. The connection to the gas station, the staring, the nails already in my tires, whether that was planned or opportunistic, I never learned. What I know is that the nails were already there when I pulled out of that gas station. Somebody had put them in my front tires while I was pumping gas and I drove 40 minutes before they finished the job. I still do regional theater. I always leave early. I always have GPS. And I never stop for gas in a town that doesn't look like it wants to be found. My name is June and I grew up on a farm in northern Iowa. I have spent my whole life around animals and open land and the particular solitude of a place where your nearest neighbor is a half-mile away in any direction. I say this because I want you to understand that I am not someone who misreads the outdoors. I know what belongs in those fields at night and I know what doesn't. What I am about to describe happened when I was 19 and staying alone at my grandparents' farm for 2 nights while they were visiting family downstate. I had done it before, watched the property, fed the animals, made sure everything was locked up. Routine. Nothing about the first day suggested the second night was going to be anything other than quiet. It started with the cows. We had 11 cattle at the time, kept in the barn overnight. I had fed and settled them around 7 and they had been quiet since. Around 11 I was in the living room watching television when I heard the first one start. A single cow calling out, which happens, not unusual. But within about 30 seconds they were all going. All 11 of them at the same time, which is a sound that does not happen without a reason. When every animal in a barn decides simultaneously that something is wrong, something is wrong. I went to the closet and got my grandfather's hunting rifle. I loaded it and went outside. The night was clear and cold. I could hear the cows from the barn clearly, they had not settled. I walked to the barn and went through the animals one by one. All of them present, none visibly injured, all oriented toward the back wall and the door that faced the cornfield. Whatever had upset them was outside. I was counting heads when I noticed the stall at the far end was open. The cow that had been in it was gone. I know I had latched that stall. I had specifically checked it because that particular animal had a history of pushing at the latch. It was latched when I left the barn at 7. I went outside the back of the barn and stood at the edge of the cornfield and listened. From somewhere inside the field I heard a sound that I cannot describe as anything other than a cow in distress, a high, strained call that doesn't come from a calm animal. And underneath it, barely audible, something else. Voices. More than one. I fired 2 rounds into the air. The cornfield went silent immediately. The cows in the barn stopped. Everything stopped. And then from inside the field I heard footsteps, multiple sets, moving quickly, going deeper in rather than toward the road. I stood there for a moment and then I went back inside. I called the police and my parents and then I sat in my grandfather's room upstairs with the rifle across my knees and I waited. The police arrived 45 minutes later. By then it was well past midnight. The officers searched the barn and the edge of the field with a flashlight, and then he found it. About 15 feet into the corn from the back of the barn, in a small clearing that had been made by pushing back the stalks, there was a circle of candles. 7 of them, evenly spaced, the wax pooled significantly enough that they had been burning for a while. In the center of the circle was the head of my grandfather's missing cow. Removed cleanly, placed deliberately, positioned upright. I was sick when the officer told me. I was sick for days after. The full investigation, state police, search team, the works, found evidence that multiple people had been in the field. Boot prints in the soft soil, a worn path suggesting they'd used that approach before. Not the first time they'd been on that property. There was a second clearing found further in, older candle wax, animal bones that the agricultural investigator identified as belonging to livestock. They had been coming to that field for months, possibly longer. No one was ever identified. No group was ever connected to it. The official classification was criminal trespass and animal cruelty. My grandparents installed cameras the following week and never had another incident that they knew about. That qualifier is the part that stays with me. That they knew about. Because the evidence suggested those people had been walking that field in the dark for a long time before anyone knew they were there. The cleared paths, the worn ground, the older wax, all of it pointed to a pattern that had been going on quietly for a long time. I don't watch the farm anymore. My grandparents sold it 4 years ago. I live in the city now, and I have for a long time, and I don't particularly miss rural life. But I still notice how the animals are behaving when I'm around them. It became automatic after that night. If a group of animals all turn the same direction at the same time and go quiet, I want to know what they're looking at. They knew before I did. They always do. My name is Wyatt and I'm 25. I grew up on a family farm in Arkansas and I still live there, though not by choice exactly, more by circumstance and the particular inertia of a place that makes it harder to leave than you'd think. My parents take a trip every summer, just the two of them, and while they're gone it's my job to keep the property. Last July it was me and my two sisters, Crystal, who's 21 and takes online college courses, and Morgan, who's 18. We're used to being on the property without our parents. It's not something that usually bothers us. That night was the exception. Morgan and I were in the living room watching something on TV around 10. Crystal was in her room with her laptop doing coursework. The dogs were outside on their chains, 2 large mixed breeds, good guard dogs, not the kind that bark at nothing. They started going crazy. I mean really going, not a warning bark, not a hey something is out there bark, but the sustained panic kind that means whatever they're reacting to hasn't left. I went out back and they were both oriented toward the cornfield, pulling at their chains, heads low. I stood there for a minute and listened. The field was dark and still. Then I heard it. A whistle. Not a bird, not wind through the stalks, a deliberate human whistle, the kind with a specific tune. Slow, patient, coming from somewhere inside the field about 30 or 40 feet in. I went back inside and got one of the rifles. My sisters both told me not to go into the field and they were right. Going into a dark cornfield alone at night toward an unknown person is not the correct decision and I knew it even in the moment. Instead I went back out, aimed into the air, and fired once. The sound echoed out across the property and the dogs went quiet and the field went quiet and I yelled as loud as I could to get off our land. I went back inside. Morgan and Crystal thought it was handled. We laughed about it a little, the kind of laugh that's mostly adrenaline burning off. I told them I was going to my room and they should lock their doors. About an hour later I was in bed with my window open and the rifle on the mattress next to me. I was watching something on my laptop when I heard it again. The same whistle. Same slow tune, same deliberate pace. Right outside my window. I got up and looked out. There was a man standing in the grass below my window maybe 20 feet away. Just standing there in the dark, looking up toward the house, whistling. Not trying to hide. Not running. Standing there like he had every right to be there. I grabbed the rifle and aimed it out the window. I fired at the grass a few feet to his left, deliberately wide, enough to make the point. He broke immediately and ran. Not back into the field, around the front of the house and out of my line of sight. I went and woke my sisters. Told them what happened, told them to stay in their rooms with the dogs. Called my dad, who said to fire another warning shot if anyone came back. Called the police, who said an officer would come by when one was available, which in a county that size means whenever. Nobody came back that night. The police drove by in the morning. They didn't find anything, no footprints that could be confirmed, no evidence of trespass they could act on. They said it might have been teenagers messing around, which I don't believe, or a drifter who moved on, which is at least possible. What I keep thinking about is the whistling. Not random sound, not an accident, a specific repeated tune, the same each time, deliberate. The kind of thing you do when you want someone to know you're there. When you want them to hear you. He wasn't hiding. He was announcing himself and waiting to see what would happen. I've thought about what would have happened if I hadn't had the rifle. If I'd gone to the window and just looked out at him and had nothing. Whether he would have stayed there or done something different. I don't know the answer. I'm glad I don't. I still live on that property. The window in my room stays closed now even in summer, which my family noticed and asked about once. I told them I'd gotten used to the AC. The real reason is that I don't want to hear a whistle from outside it again. And I especially don't want to lie there in the dark wondering whether I'm hearing it or imagining it. The closed window is the thing that makes the difference. Small adjustments. That's how you carry something like this. You just build it into the structure of how you live, and after a while you stop noticing the weight. 3 accounts. 3 different properties. Nobody ever identified, nobody ever found. If these stayed with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next ones are already waiting.